Hey everyone, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because what I'm about to confess is something I've never told anyone. I'm going to tell you my real story, the one that still keeps me up at night. I was just a regular guy in my mid-20s, living at home after college, helping my single mom pay the bills while I figured out my life. Everything felt ordinary until that sweltering summer evening when Mom whispered passionately right against my ear, right, "Love me with all your heat, give me your hottest love." Her voice was trembling, her breath hot on my skin, and in that moment the air between us changed forever. I can still feel the way the words brushed my ear, warm and unsteady, like she was afraid to say them but even more afraid not to. The kitchen light was dim, just the two of us after a long day, and her body was so close I could sense the faint vanilla from her lotion mixing with the summer heat clinging to her skin. My heart slammed against my ribs. She pulled back just enough for our eyes to meet, and for one endless second neither of us moved. I should have laughed it off. I should have stepped away. Instead I stood there frozen, the echo of her whisper burning through me like a secret I was never meant to hear. Every morning after that I'd wake up to the familiar scent of her vanilla body lotion drifting down the hallway. We started spending more time together in the small apartment, cooking dinner side by side, her hip brushing mine at the counter. I told myself it was just normal mother-son closeness, but my eyes kept lingering on the curve of her neck when she tied her hair up. The way a few loose strands would fall against her damp skin after the heat of the stove, it made something inside me tighten. It forced my gaze back to the chopping board, but the pull was already there, quiet and insistent, like gravity I couldn't fight. She'd laugh softly at some silly thing I said, and the sound would wrap around me warmer than the evening air coming through the open window. Our arms would graze when we reached for the same spice, and each time it felt like a spark jumping between us. I kept repeating in my head that this was innocent, that we were just people who only had each other in this tiny place. But deep down I knew the lie was getting thinner every day. The internal voice whispered, "This is wrong, Chess, your mom." That night I lay in bed replaying her whispered words, my heart pounding against the sheets. The fan spun lazily overhead but did nothing to cool the flush crawling over my body. She didn't mean it like that. I told myself again and again, yet the memory of her soft, desperate tone made heat pool low in my stomach. I felt sick with guilt. How could I even think of her this way? She had sacrificed everything for me, raising me alone, working double shifts so I could finish school without drowning in debt. She deserved better than a son whose mind kept drifting to the way her breath had trembled against his ear. Yet the forbidden pull was already stronger than my shame. I turned over, pressing my face into the pillow, but her voice kept echoing, husky and urgent. "Love me with all your heat," the words wrapped around me like invisible hands, and no matter how hard I tried to push them away, they only sank deeper. My chest ached with the war inside, part of me desperate to forget, the other part already craving the next time she might say something that made the world tilt again. I didn't sleep much that night. Every small sound in the quiet apartment made me wonder if she was lying awake too, thinking about the same dangerous line we had almost crossed. The next morning the vanilla scent greeted me again, softer this time, like a gentle reminder I couldn't escape. When she passed me in the narrow hallway, her shoulder brushed my chest, and for a heartbeat we both paused. Her eyes flicked up to mine, and I saw something flicker there, something uncertain, something hungry. Neither of us spoke. We just stood there, breathing the same warm air, the space between us feeling smaller than ever. I wanted to say it was nothing. I wanted to believe it. But the ache had already begun, quiet and relentless, pulling me toward her even as every rational thought screamed for me to turn back. And then, as she moved past me toward the kitchen, her fingers lightly grazed my wrist just for a second. It was barely a touch, yet it sent a shiver racing up my arm that I couldn't hide. She didn't look back, but I stood there long after she was gone, heart racing, wondering how much longer I could pretend this was still innocent. The days blurred under the relentless heatwave, each one heavier than the last. Mom started wearing those thin tank tops around the house, the kind that clung just enough when sweat traced slope as along her collarbone. I tried not to notice, but my eyes kept finding that glistening line, the way it caught the light from the window. Sharing one thin blanket, and her bare thigh would press against mine without either of us moving away. The warmth of her skin seeped through the fabric, steady and impossible to ignore. Every accidental shift sent a sharp spark racing up my leg. I'd tell myself, Just one more minute like this won't hurt anyone, but the minutes stretched, and the lie felt thinner each time. Her breathing would change during the quiet scenes, softer, deeper, matching the slow rise and fall of my own chest. The room smelled faintly of vanilla lotion mixed with the faint salt of sweat, wrapping around us like a secret neither wanted to name. I kept my hands still on my lap, but the space between our bodies hummed with something alive, pulling tighter. She'd laugh at a silly line in the film, the sound low and close, and did feel it vibrate through the cushion we shared. My mind raced ahead, imagining what it would be like if I let my fingers drift just an inch closer, then it'd snap back, heart hammering, ashamed of how easily the thought arrived. One evening after Shed poured herself a glass of wine, the air felt even thicker. She hugged me goodnight longer than usual, her body melting softly into mine as if the day's exhaustion had finally won. I felt the gentle press against my chest, warm and yielding, and my pulse stumbled. She whispered then, voice husky and trembling, "You're so warm. I need your heat." The words brushed my ear like a forbidden breeze. My hands slid down her back on their own, tracing the line of her spine through the thin fabric, and for a heartbeat everything narrowed to that single point of contact. I pulled away shaking, breath caught somewhere in my throat, but the scent of her vanilla lotion clung to my shirt like an invisible brand I couldn't wash off. That night I lay awake, the fan doing nothing against the flush burning across my skin. How could a simple hug feel like crossing into dangerous territory? She was lonely. I was lonely, that's all it was. Yet the memory of her softness refused to fade, leaving an ache that settled deep and refused to leave. I stared at the ceiling, whispering to the dark that this had to stop, even as another voice inside answered that it already felt too late. The next night we sat closer on the couch, her head eventually resting on my shoulder while an old slow song played from her playlist, the melody wrapping around us like warm silk. Her fingers began tracing lazy circles on my arm, light as breath, sending tiny shivers racing across my skin. I didn't stop her. The guilt twisted in my chest, sharp and familiar, but the rush of being wanted like this drowned it out for those stolen minutes. We were both adults, the voice in my head reasoned carefully. Just comfort. Nothing more. Her breathing grew a little uneven against my neck, and I felt the pull deepen, gravity drawing me toward her even as shame clawed at the edges. I convinced myself it was mutual, this quiet need we shared in the sweltering quiet of our small world. She had given up so much for me over the years, and now the heatwave had stripped away the usual barriers and, leaving only skin and breath and unspoken hunger. When her fingers paused, hovering near my wrist, I held still, afraid that moving would break the spell or make it real. The song faded into another, but neither of us shifted away. The air between us crackled with everything we weren't saying, and I wondered how much longer we could dance along this edge without falling. Then, as the playlist looped softly, she lifted her head just enough for our eyes to meet in the dim light. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came, only that same husky whisper echoing in my mind from before, pulling me closer despite every warning screaming inside. My hand moved before I could think, brushing a strand of hair from her damp forehead, and the touch lingered a second too long. The room felt smaller, the heat heavier, and in that suspended moment I realized the line we'd been skirting had already begun to blur beyond recognition. The weeks that followed wrapped around us like vines tightening with every passing day. Late night, talks that once stayed safe on the couch stretched longer, her voice dropping to that low murmur that made my chest tighten. One evening the old sensual song started playing again from her phone, soft and insistent, and somehow we were standing, her arms sliding around my neck as if gravity had decided for us. My hands settled on her waist, then drifted a fraction lower, feeling the warmth of her through the thin fabric of her nightdress. She breathed in sharply, that small hitch sending a rush through me I couldn't name. I whispered, "We can't." I whispered, "We can't," even as I pulled her closer for what felt like a slow dance in the dim living room light. Her body moved with mine, soft and yielding, the scent of vanilla rising between us like a secret neither of us wanted to name. Every time my fingers pressed just a little firmer, she leaned in, eyes heavy with something hungry that mirrored the ache building inside me. Night after night the pattern repeated, each hug lingering until it felt like we were testing how close we could get without breaking. I'd pull back, heart racing, telling myself this was the last time, but then she'd look at me with those eyes, dark and wanting, and the cycle would start again. The air in the house grew thick with unsaid words, skin remembering the press of hers long after we separated. I became obsessed with the way her breath would catch when my palm rested against the small of her back, the subtle tremble that ran through her frame. We were both pretending it was still innocent comfort, yet the tension coiled tighter, leaving me restless even in the daylight hours when everything looked normal. Then came the thunderstorm that changed everything. The power flickered out mid-evening, plunging the house into sudden darkness broken only by flashes of lightning outside. We lit a few candles, their warm glow dancing across the walls and turning the living room into something dreamlike and unreal. Rain hammered against the windows, masking every other sound as we sat together on the couch, closer than before. Her body pressed against mine, seeking warmth in the cool draft that slipped through the cracks. I could feel the steady beat of her heart through our clothes, rapid and alive. She turned her face toward me, lips parted, and whispered passionately once more, voice trembling with raw need, "Love me with all your heat, give me your hottest love." The words hung there, heavy and electric, pulling at every restraint I had left. This time I didn't pull away. My mouth found hers in the flickering light, the kiss slow at first, then deepening with a hunger that had been building for weeks. My hands moved across the familiar curves of the body I had known my whole life, yet never like this, tracing paths that sent heat flooding through us both. The vanilla scent of her skin mixed with the faint salt of sweat in the charged air of the storm, creating something intoxicating I couldn't escape. The rain drowned out everything else as we crossed the line completely, surrender washing over us in waves that left no room for turning back. In that moment nothing else existed, just the press of warmth, the shared breath, the overwhelming pull that finally won. Afterward we fell into a secret rhythm that consumed our quiet world. Stolen kisses happened in the kitchen while coffee brewed, quick and breathless, her fingers brushing my jaw before we heard any distant sound. Passionate nights unfolded when the house fell silent, her whispers guiding me back to that same edge of heat and closeness. She seemed happier, lighter somehow, her laughter ringing softer and more alive than I remembered in years. I felt needed in a way that filled an empty space inside me, as if this forbidden connection had awakened something vital. Yet with every stolen moment the guilt grew heavier, pressing down like the humidity that still clung to the air even after the storm passed. Every time I heard her hum that song under her breath, the reminder hit hard she was my mother, and this was a line we could never uncross. Their messages piling up with questions I dodged with vague excuses. The double life drained me, smiles during the day cracking under the weight of what happened in the dark. Still, I couldn't let her go. The way she looked at me now, soft and craving, kept pulling me back despite the shame twisting deeper with each passing day. One afternoon as we stood inches apart in the hallway, her hand resting lightly on my chest, I felt the familiar ache rise again, stronger than before. Her breath brushed warm against my collarbone, and just as I leaned in, a car door slammed outside, jolting us apart. The interruption left me trembling, heart pounding with the realization that our careful world was balancing on something far too fragile. Then came the night she accidentally left her phone open on the kitchen counter while she stepped out for a moment. The screen glowed softly in the dim light, a single notification pulsing like a warning I couldn't ignore. I leaned closer, heart already uneasy, and the message from her best friend stared back at me. "You can't keep doing this with your own son, it's destroying you both." Those words landed like ice water down my spine, freezing everything inside me in an instant. The fantasy we had built in whispers and stolen warmth cracked wide open, revealing the devastation underneath. My stomach twisted violently as I saw it clearly for the first time, the moral wreckage we had created together. The line we had blurred until it disappeared completely. How far we had fallen, how completely we had lost ourselves in this forbidden gravity. I sat there in the dark long after the screen went black, the vanilla scent that once pulled me under now turning my stomach with nausea instead of that familiar ache. The sensual song she loved to hum in the quiet hours now sounded like a distant warning bell echoing through my skull. I knew we had to stop. Every rational part of me screamed that this had gone too far, that I was supposed to be her son, not whatever twisted version of love we had invented in the shadows. Yet the love, twisted and desperate as it was, still burned low in my chest, refusing to die. Part of me wanted to run far away and never look back, to reclaim the innocence we had shattered. Another part, the one that trembled at the memory of her breath against my skin, wanted nothing more than to hold her one last time, to feel that impossible closeness before it vanished forever. The internal war raged louder than the storm that had started it all, raw desire pulling me down versus the son I was supposed to be, the boy she had raised with gentle hands, now breaking her in ways no one could forgive. Hours later, when she returned and saw my face, she knew without a word. We stood facing each other in the hallway where we had almost lost control so many times before, the air thick with everything unsaid. I finally told her we cowled and continue. Her lips parted as if to whisper those passionate words again, love me, with all your heat, but nothing came out except a soft, shattered breath. We didn't touch. We simply stood there, inches apart, the heat between us now laced with unbearable sorrow. She nodded slowly, eyes glistening, accepting the end even as her body still leaned toward mine out of habit. In that moment, the surrender we once craved felt like the coldest kind of defeat. Now I'm left alone with the aftermath, haunted by the echo of her whispered confessions and the hottest love I ever gave or received. The house feels too quiet, every familiar scent and sound a reminder of how close we came to something we could never keep. I wonder if she lies awake too, replaying those nights when the world narrowed to just us and the storm outside. Was this unforgivable, or were we simply two lonely souls who crossed a line neither of us saw clearly until it was too late? The ache remains, unresolved and raw, pulling at me even now with questions that have no gentle answers. What do you think I should do? Drop your honest opinion in the comments. I read every single one. If this confession hit you hard, smash that like button, subscribe for more raw stories like this, and let me know if you want the even more intense details of what happened in the dark. See you in the next one if the weight of these memories ever lets me speak of them again.